Signature English Podcast.
Brought to you by English Speaking Signature.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Signature English Podcast. I'm Silas, and I'm joined by my co-host, Zara.
Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here with our community today.
Yeah, it really is. And, we have such an interesting deep dive lined up for you all today. But, before we get into the main source material, I actually had a moment this morning that just perfectly sets up our entire topic.
Oh, really? What happened this morning?
Okay, so I was at this cafe, right? And I was trying to order in a language I'm still, actively learning. And the barista asks me a super basic question, like really basic.
Right, something you've probably studied 100 times.
Exactly. But instead of just answering naturally, my brain just brought up this massive mental loading bar.
Oh, no, I know exactly what you mean by the loading bar.
Yeah, I just stood there. There was this specific, terrifying kind of silence. The conversation completely stopped. The barista's looking at me. And I was just trapped in that dreaded spotlight effect.
Yeah, that intense pressure where you feel like all eyes are on you.
Yes. And internally, I was frantically trying to draft the absolute perfect sentence. I was, checking the noun, conjugating the verb, second-guessing the preposition.
Doing the whole grammar checklist in your head.
Right. And by the time my mental loading bar finally hit 100%, the moment had entirely passed. The barista was already looking at the next customer, and I was just standing there with my flawless, unspoken sentence, feeling totally invisible.
Which is such a universal experience for our community. I mean, that moment of silence is dreaded by everyone. The pressure feels like an actual physical weight in the room.
It really does. You just feel so stuck.
But the paradox is that your mind is actually anything but blank in that silence. I mean, you are usually in a state of hyperactivity, right? Frantically trying to cross-reference every single word from your native language into English before you dare to let a sound out.
Exactly. It's an exhausting way to communicate. And, our mission for this deep dive today is to master the art of thinking directly in a non-native language, specifically English, of course.
Right. We are unpacking the mechanics of moving away from those exhausting translation habits and stepping into true spontaneous fluency.
Yeah, and the sources we are looking at today argue that what happened to me at the cafe, it wasn't a failure of intelligence.
Yeah.
And it probably wasn't even a lack of vocabulary.
No, not at all. It was a mechanical failure in how you were processing the information. Because to fix this, we really have to stop treating language like a math equation.
Yes, the math equation. The guide refers to this as the perfectionism trap.
Right, because it is a trap. Traditional education completely ingrained this flaw in us.
Right. I mean, in school, we are taught that language is basically algebra, A equals B. So if you have a thought in your native language, you just search for the exact one-to-one equivalent English puzzle piece, snap it into place, and boom, you have a sentence.
Which is just not how human communication works. The problem is that language is deeply rooted in feelings, right? It's about cultural context, shared human experiences.
It's messy. It's not a clean equation.
Exactly. The mathematical one-to-one translation is a complete illusion. And chasing that illusion not only slows you down, but it rapidly drains your mental energy.
Which brings us to a huge point from the research. To understand why it's so exhausting, the guide introduces this concept of cognitive load.
Yes, cognitive load. It's a fascinating area of psychology tied directly to your working memory.
And, our working memory isn't an infinite hard drive. It's not like a massive computer server.
Not at all. Cognitive psychologists note that working memory is actually a highly fragile holding area. It has a very strict limit.
Yeah, they say it can only hold maybe 4 to 7 pieces of information at any given time.
Right. So when we speak our native language, that load is incredibly low. A thought appears, and the words just map to it automatically without occupying those mental slots.
But okay, when you actively translate, you're intentionally hijacking every single available slot in that working memory.
You really are. Think about the steps. First, you hold the original thought. Then, you formulate it in your native language. Then, you hold that sentence while you open your mental dictionary to search for the English equivalents.
It's so much work.
It is. And after that, you still have to juggle the grammar rules to arrange those new words properly. By the time you are ready to speak, your working memory is at maximum capacity.
You are doing triple the work for a single sentence. I mean, looking at this mechanism, it maps so perfectly onto a technology analogy for me.
Oh, I love your tech analogies. Let's hear it.
Okay, so imagine you have a standard laptop, right? And you want to play this really complex video game that was coded for an entirely different operating system.
Okay, I'm following.
To make it run, You have to install a software emulator. That emulator just sits in the background, translating the game's code in real time so your laptop's hardware can actually understand it.
Right, and the result of running an emulator like that is immediate system strain. I mean, the cooling fans scream, the screen stutter.
The frame rate drops, totally. And your battery just drains from full to zero in a matter of minutes.
Which is exactly what happens to our brains. The translation habit is the mental emulator.
Yes. Mentally translating every thought is like running heavy, outdated software in your brain. It explains why our community members often feel physically exhausted after just a 10-minute conversation in English.
Their mental batteries are entirely depleted.
Exactly. But if we are draining all our energy just trying to be these perfect walking dictionaries, we are completely missing the actual point of human interaction.
We really are. The goal is the transfer of ideas, right?
Yeah.
Not passing a flawless vocabulary test.
Right. If your mental emulator is lagging so hard that you can't even listen to the other person, the communication has already failed.
Because connection always trumps perfection. Always.
So the question then becomes how to optimize the system. If mental translation is overloading the working memory and killing the battery, the only logical solution is to just uninstall the emulator entirely.
We have to figure out how to bypass that native language middleman. Thoughts need to link directly to English words.
And the sources outline a highly practical solution for this. They call it narrative labeling.
Narrative labeling is brilliant. It involves actively changing your internal monologue.
Right. So instead of narrating your day in your native language, you actively force that internal voice into simple English.
Exactly. You walk through your house and you literally think, I am picking up the keys. I am opening the door. The weather is cold.
You are attaching the English words directly to physical actions and objects in your immediate environment.
Yes. And by doing this, you are building a direct neural pathway. You see the keys, you feel the keys, and the brain associates that sensory input directly with the English word keys.
Rather than bouncing the concept through your native language center first.
Exactly. You bypass the translation entirely.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here on behalf of the ambitious learners in our community.
Okay, go for it.
If someone is preparing to, say, defend a PhD thesis abroad or stepping into a high-stakes corporate negotiation, doesn't an exercise like, I am picking up the keys, feel like a massive waste of time?
That is such a fair question.
I mean, how does practicing beginner, B1 level survival vocabulary bridge the gap for someone who desperately needs advanced C1 level professional fluency?
Well, that skepticism is incredibly common. But it is exactly why advanced learners often plateau.
Oh, really? How so?
They assume they need to spend all their time memorizing complex geopolitical or technical vocabulary. But the secret the sources reveal is that practicing this low-stakes, basic vocabulary is exactly what builds the speed required for advanced fluency.
Ah, okay. Because it circles back to those working memory slots we discussed earlier.
Precisely. If the basics aren't automatic, they are still taking up space on your mental workbench.
That makes total sense.
Right. If you are in that high-stakes negotiation and your brain has to spend even a fraction of a second processing how to say, I opened the document, your working memory is occupied.
You're burning your limited battery power on the foundation.
Exactly. Narrative labeling makes foundational language entirely automatic. Once a phrase is internalized, it takes up virtually zero cognitive load.
So you are automating the simple stuff to free up the system's RAM.
Yes, by freeing up that cognitive bandwidth, your brain actually has the energy and the space to focus on complex business strategy or the nuances of your PhD defense.
Rather than panicking over basic verb tenses.
Exactly. You are creating the conditions for spontaneous thought, where the language just flows without any premeditation.
And the beauty of this approach is how smoothly it fits into a busy schedule. The guide emphasizes that this shouldn't be a grueling 2-hour study session.
Oh, absolutely not. Trying to actively narrate your life in a second language for 2 hours straight would cause massive burnout.
It would be awful. Instead, the strategy relies on behavioral psychology concepts, specifically building atomic habits using what they call pocket time.
I love the concept of pocket time. It's brilliant in its accessibility.
Right, because we all have these scattered 5-minute windows throughout our day.
Exactly. You are waiting for the kettle to boil, standing in an elevator, or just walking from your car to the office.
The sources suggest taking those small, frictionless moments to run your narrative labeling routine. just 5 minutes.
It leverages the idea that tiny, consistent changes yield massive result over time. 5 minutes of low-stress practice doesn't trigger the brain's resistance to studying.
Right. It doesn't feel like a chore. You slowly internalize the language patterns until thinking in English feels less like a deliberate task and more like a reflex.
You are systematically uninstalling that emulator, just 5 minutes at a time.
But, okay, let's look at the reality of real-world conversations. Narrative labeling is an excellent tool for controlled environments, right? When you are alone and the stakes are zero.
True. But language is inherently unpredictable.
Exactly. We have to look at what happens when your pocket time practice collides with a chaotic, real-world conversation, and the system inevitably glitches.
Because it will glitch. No matter how perfectly you optimize your mental software, you are still going to hit a wall eventually.
Right. You will be mid-sentence, the rhythm is great, and suddenly the mind goes completely blank. The exact word you need just vanishes into thin air.
It is the worst feeling. But the guide introduces an emergency protocol for this exact moment. It's called circumlocution.
Circumlocution. It is the ultimate conversational survival tool.
It really is. Circumlocution literally means talking around something. It is the act of using multiple words to describe a concept when the exact single term drops out of your memory.
The sources use this classic example of forgetting the word refrigerator.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example.
So imagine you are at a friend's house, speaking English, and you want to ask where the refrigerator is, but the word is just gone.
And if you fall back into the perfectionism trap, the spotlight effect hits hard.
Yes, you freeze, you pause the conversation, and you dive desperately into your mental dictionary while your friend just stares at you.
Which is the worst possible thing you can do from a psychological standpoint.
Why is that? What's happening in the brain?
Well, when you hit that spotlight effect, your brain perceives a social threat. Cortisol, the stress hormone, just floods your system.
Wow, okay.
And high cortisol levels literally impair the memory retrieval centers of the brain. The harder you try to force the translation in a state of panic, the less likely you are to actually remember the word.
The panic literally blocks the memory. That is wild.
It is. So circumlocution tells you to bypass the perfect word entirely to keep the stress levels low.
You don't know refrigerator. You just point and ask for the cold box for food.
Exactly. And your friend knows exactly what you mean. The connection isn't broken.
Right, the communication still happened.
But more importantly, by accepting the imperfect phrasing, you lower the stakes. You prevent that cortisol spike entirely.
And often because you stayed relaxed and kept the conversation moving, the word refrigerator will just naturally pop back into your head a minute later.
Precisely. I love that insight into the psychology of it.
Me too. And I think it's crucial to point out to our community that native speakers use circumlocution constantly.
Oh, all the time. It is not a sign of failure at all.
No, it is a natural feature of fluent speech. When a native speaker forgets a word, they don't panic or apologize for their poor vocabulary.
They definitely don't. They just say, hey, can you hand me that thingamajig?
Or, where's the clicker for the TV? They confidently talk around the gap. Native speakers treat a forgotten word like a minor pothole on the road, and they just drive right around it without touching the brakes.
That is a perfect way to describe it. Reframing circumlocution as a valid, highly effective tool rather than a humiliating mistake changes everything.
It really does take the pressure off.
Because when you remove the fear of forgetting a word, the overall cognitive load drops dramatically. You realize that you don't actually need a flawless, dictionary-level vocabulary to have a deeply engaging conversation.
You just need the flexibility to navigate the gaps gracefully.
Exactly.
Right.
We are human communicators, not search engines.
I love that. Human communicators, not search engines.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up today's discussion, let's move into our vocabulary spotlight.
Yes, let's do it. For today's spotlight, we've selected 4 signature words from our discussion. These are advanced C1 level words that will really elevate your professional vocabulary.
All right, what is our first word?
The first word is cognitive. It means relating to the mental processes of perception, memory, judgment, and reasoning.
Right, like when we talk about cognitive load. A good hack for this is to use it in business meetings to sound very analytical, like, this new software reduces the cognitive load on our team. It sounds very professional.
Very classy. Our second word is circumlocution. As we discussed, it's the use of many words where fewer would do, especially in a deliberate attempt to be vague or evasive, but in our case, as a survival tool.
Yeah, you could say I had a total mind blank during the presentation, so I had to rely on circumlocution to explain the new product.
Perfect. Word number 3 is spontaneous. It means performing or occurring as a result of the sudden inner impulse or inclination without premeditation.
A great word. You might say, the best part of the trip was a spontaneous decision to visit the old castle.
And our final word, which ties right into that, is premeditation. It is the action of planning something beforehand.
Right, so you can tell a friend, I want my English to flow naturally without any premeditation.
Excellent examples. Using these words will definitely give your English that sophisticated edge.
Absolutely. All right, now it is time for the signature challenge. We want to see you put this into practice.
Yes, we love seeing your responses.
So head down to the comment section right now. We want you to choose a common household object, but you cannot use its actual name. Use circumlocution to describe it, and let's see if our community can guess what it is.
Oh, that is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to read those.
It's going to be great. So to pull all these threads together, the journey we've explored today is really a transition from paralysis to freedom.
It is. The path to truly spontaneous fluency requires us to actively reject the idea that language is a math equation.
Because clinging to that one-to-one translation creates that massive cognitive load that just exhausts our working memory.
Exactly. To fix it, we utilize our pocket time to practice narrative labeling. I am holding the coffee. I am opening the door.
We use those 5-minute windows to build direct neural pathways, automating the basics so we have the mental bandwidth for complex, high-level thoughts later.
And when the unpredictable happens and a word escapes us, we don't bring up the mental loading bar.
No, we embrace circumlocution. We ask for the cold box for food because keeping the flow of the conversation alive is vastly more important than finding the absolute perfect word.
Connection over perfection. This philosophy applies whether you are catching up in an entirely new academic field, trying to hold your own in a high-pressure board meeting abroad,
Or just sitting at a cafe trying to connect with someone new. Communication is the art of sharing ideas and sharing a piece of yourself. It is not a strict grammar test. Let go of the loading bar.
But as we wrap up today, there's one final provocative angle from the sources that we want to leave you with to ponder on your own.
Yeah, this really got me thinking. We've established that language thrives on shared context and human connection, rather than robotic precision.
Right. So consider this. When we obsess over finding the perfect word, and we let that awkward silence stretch on while we buffer, how much of our actual authentic personality is getting lost in that silence?
It's a profound question. We often strip away our humor, our natural warmth, and our spontaneous reactions simply because we are too focused on the mechanical gears of the sentence.
If a flawlessly precise, mathematically perfect translation completely erases your natural charisma, is it really a better form of communication?
Probably not. It is entirely possible that our slight stumbles, our quirky workarounds, our requests for the cold box for food, maybe those perceived mistakes are exactly the things that make us relatable, endearing human beings in the first place.
It is definitely something to think about the next time your brain tries to stall out. Perfection is usually the enemy of true connection.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of spontaneous fluency. Stop thinking and start talking.